Hi, my name is Thaddeus Dawson, and welcome to our 10K MA program. Today we have none other than Morehouse alumni and Morehouse professor, MAI, basically just genius extraordinaire, uh, Mr. Oscar Sistrunk. Oscar is the first black MAI in the state of Georgia in the early 80s. I believe Oscar is from New Jersey. I have had the pleasure of knowing Oscar since 2009, 2010. We both used to do some work together at Capital City Bank. He has served as an official, unofficial mentor for me over the years since I've known him. It's been an extreme pleasure. He's just a teacher at heart. Currently, he teaches the entrepreneurial class at Best Academy that he took over because I was doing a lot of traveling, and so we share that class, and it's been a pleasure. And he's a much better instructor than me. I had the pleasure of working with him at Morehouse a number of years ago, where I got to meet Dr. Williams, and Dr. Williams. I just always remember in that first meeting, he was clear about he didn't care if the kids ever became appraisers. He wanted them to learn critical thinking skills and learn how to be able to apply them. And that is what the foundation is, sort of, at Morehouse. And today we'll get to dive into all the people that Oscar has instructed. He's touched so many lives as an instructor at Morehouse, and he's also just been so very gracious. So he's also taught folks not only in, in business and real estate, he's also trained several appraisers, and you can see his students all over the landscape in Atlanta doing amazing things. He's definitely a forward thinker and into the future. He has bought property with cryptocurrency. This is some of the things that he's teaching the younger people now: how to buy property utilizing fractional interest in Bitcoin and doing development. We've also He's also a TV icon, and will show you a clip from his Deal or No Deal. And we also, during this interview, will get to ask him about that Benjamin Buttons juice that he takes, the reverse aging, because he's probably looks 20 years younger since this video that he took 20 years ago. Rick, you want to give us a quick glimpse of that video?
Whatever you decide, I'm happy.
Reward. So we always have risk, but we have calculated risk. And, we've been having fun here, but it is time to go home.
So that was Oscar on Deal or No Deal. He kind of looked like a black Homer Simpson back then. So without further ado, Professor Oscar Sistrunk.
Oh, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure talking to you guys. I'm looking forward to it.
So we got our normal guest, Miss Shawnee Allridge, who is doing her thing. She's a broker and an appraiser, and she had the pleasure of meeting Oscar when we started on this 10K MA journey in June of 2023. We had our kickoff dinner, and Oscar was there and present. And he's always been so gracious with knowledge and information. And a lot of people like to hold on to stuff, and Oscar is all about empowerment and education. And he's just been a true blessing to me amongst his bevy of students that have come through Morehouse. Even my brother was one of his students in the early 90s in some of his cohorts. And I've always had this question, Oscar. I know they
Yes.
make you take I'm the most important person in the world 101 when you get to Morehouse, and you can't graduate until you take most important person in the world 401 at a senior level. But y'all got to be some of the most important, highfalutin Negroes I have ever seen in my life. Can you
Yeah,
speak on that a little bit?
oh, sure. It's funny because, you were right. I'm from New Jersey. And my parents, who went to HBCUs but didn't go to Morehouse, when I told them I wanted to go to an HBCU back 50 years ago, 1974, um, Morehouse was like one of the ones that they gave me a list of: Morehouse, Hampton, or Howard. And I ended up choosing Morehouse because it was the furthest away from my mother. I told my mom that I did not want her coming by my dormitories on the weekend when I got visitors. So I was already setting up. I knew what was going to happen. And I did not need her knocking on the door, giving me some ice cream and cake or some mess. I said, I can handle myself. So I ended up coming to Atlanta. And one thing about Morehouse is some of them, yeah, that, they tell you, you can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell them much. It's because what we do is we let them know that you're second to nobody, right? And that don't let people try and talk bad about you, because normally those are just haters who hate themselves, right? So if you understand where you are and what you're good at, and you become the best, then there is nobody else better than you, or you're as good as they are. And what you need to do, which is what I try and do, is I'm always trying to find my replacement. So I don't care where that comes from, who that is. So I'm always trying to help others because that's just something I like to do. And there's a lot of us like that. Not all of us, but a lot of us understand that we've been given the opportunity to be successful and to help everybody. We need to help others in the community because eventually I'm going to be gone. I'm going to go visit my ancestors and have a good time and chill out. And somebody's got to take my spot.
But your ability to connect to the younger students, especially at the high school level, is just amazing to me. And when you get into that classroom, man, you just light up like no other. I really enjoy it, but you take it exponentially further. And I'm always trying to feed off of your energy. And when I got busy and wasn't able to get to all the sessions, I was so thankful. And you just stepped in with programming and education that is just amazing. And I'm just thankful that you do it. But as far as that confidence, my brother graduated from Morehouse in 1990. And man, he was so insufferable when he came home. My dad had been in business, running the HVAC business for 40 years, which actually put my brother through college, paid for his college. But my brother knew more about the world and everything in it. And now the funny part is my brother now runs the HVAC business in Cincinnati. And I don't think that confidence or insufferability has waned one iota. And I tease him and all his little Morehouse friends all the time about that.
Yep, it is. I mean, that's just the way it is because it's contagious. See, here's what it is. It's the environment that you create. I tell people all. As a matter of fact, I told the class yesterday. We live in the sewer. We just don't know it. We live in the sewer because we got stuff all around us. We don't know that. We think that's what it is. Once you step out and get out of it and understand who you are, then you realize that you're in an environment that's really poisonous as a black man or as a black woman. There are things that we go through that nobody else goes through. So they always think, oh, you just don't know. No, you know once you get away from it and see. So when you come to Morehouse or some other HBCUs like that, you're put in an environment where everybody's trying to help you. You don't have to worry. If you mess up, it's not because you're black. It's because you're lazy. Get yourself together, get organized, and show how talented you are. Right? You can't blame it on the white man. You can't blame it on anybody else. You're at Morehouse. You're in my class. You either do the work or if you need to, you go home. There's nothing wrong with going home. Not everybody's made up to be successful, or at least not successful at Morehouse. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to gut it out, man up, put your big boy pants on. And I tell them all the time, you can have your mother call me, and I'll tell her the same thing. Okay, I don't care. You're either gonna do the work and pass, or you can go home and then tell all your friends how you failed out of Morehouse, that you didn't have it. You weren't man enough. And you know what that does, right? To a guy who's pretty smart, he's like, "Well, damn, sister, you can't talk to me like that. Who you think you are? I'm the teacher. Guess what? I already graduated from Morehouse, and I'm not scared of your mother. I'm not scared of your father, your grandparents, or nobody else. Do what you get. If you don't do your work, and if you don't pass, you fail, and you go home and burnt up all that money. Now, what you gonna do?"
I think we try to make sure that we equip them to succeed, and we're probably a little harder on them than anybody else because we know that you have to be twice as good to get half as
That's right.
far. We don't get the ability of anonymity when we show up. So some of the things that you've done has been very forward thinking and at the forefront. I mean, I've seen you do market analysis to appraise college campuses across the country for trust funds or retirement and pension funds. Some of the unique assignment work that you do requires critical thinking skills, and you're always out of the box, and you just don't mind sharing. And you have approached it from an academic standpoint from the time I don't think believe they offer this program anymore. But when you got your MAI, it was a MAI MBA program at Georgia State, if I'm not mistaken, in the early '80s. And a lot of times, the appraisal world likes to, in the past, discriminate against appraisers that come from academia as opposed to appraising, which has been somewhat of a fallacy and ass backwards. And now I think it's even more important than ever to be educated, especially with the technology. And that is how we plan to transform the appraisal industry because it is outdated. And I believe we can update the model through data science, utilizing evidence based, data driven market analysis, which will actually mitigate and eliminate bias in appraising moving forward. And you've been at the cutting edge of that. And then when it comes to the future of real estate, your work with blockchain technology, Bitcoin, valuing NFTs, developing real estate utilizing fractional interest in Bitcoin is what the future is. And I just am thankful that you took time out to educate me on Bitcoin, even when I wasn't listening. And you made a boatload of money, and I got left behind. And but then I was there. You were able to pick it up and move forward. So I'm really thankful about that. Shawnee, I'm not gonna let Oscar talk. I'm gonna let you get in there because I know I'm always running my mouth. So
Well, I'm always fascinated when someone has um, the desire to speak to the younger population. And, I just wanted to know, Oscar, like, um, how important do you think it is to bring in fresh population of appraisers, especially the young folks? So I'm talking about students that are graduating college. How important do you think that is to sustain the industry?
Well, no, it's very important. One of the things I realized when I was a student at Morehouse, the what we would call, I guess, the older generation back then, the guys on Auburn Avenue and Butler Street YMCA, uh, they didn't really, I didn't see them come over and interact with us much. There's a lot of issues going
Mm,
on because of integration and that kind of stuff. But I
yeah.
remember I'm an old YMCA guy. As a little kid, I was in the YMCA. My first job when I was 13 was at the YMCA as what's called a CYT. counselor in training, all the way up until I actually was director of YMCA program. So I've always worked with kids. When I was at
Right. Okay.
Morehouse, I went to Butler Street YMCA because I'm saying I want to join the YMCA here. So the first YMCA I went to was the white one, and I didn't realize that they were segregated at the time. So the white one told me that, there's this place on Butler Street you need to go to. So I went to the Butler Street YMCA, right? I was
So
kind
they
of
directed
frustrated.
you right out of there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I'm not used to a YMCA being segregated, right? So I go to the Butler Street Y and I introduce myself and I tell them, I've been a counselor and I've done this, got a big resume. And they said, okay, and never reached out to me again. Since then, with the Butler Street, of course, most of them guys got old and passed on, but they should have been out there trying to seek young people to eventually replace them. And so one
Right.
of the things I've
That's what I
always,
see
and I
quite a
did,
bit of, Oscar. That you've been forward thinking, trying to find your replacement, and most folks in the realty and appraising industry act like they're going to be here forever. And I
Yes.
believe, like you believe, you can't be successful without successors. And so that has been a large part of the disconnect in the appraisal profession as a whole, but especially amongst black appraisers. There was very few to begin with, and those that were there didn't reach back and help. And the other piece to it is 90% of all of the black appraisers only do residential. So there's a very small cohort that even gets the opportunity to be even exposed to commercial, which is a whole nother opportunity in and of itself. And with the basis that you teach and that we're teaching, modernizing the process, folks will be able to go as far as they would like to go in the process for the training. And you've always been at the forefront. And I know your students at Morehouse are not particularly interested in becoming appraisers. They're interested
Right.
in using the valuation process to take over hedge funds and do real estate at a large level. So I know you've got some commercial underwriters doing development and underwriting hotel stacks and industrial portfolios and that sort of thing. But you teach the valuation from a standpoint of being able to establish the basis in how to use that skill set to make money.
right. It doesn't, even if you want to become just, even if you want to buy your own house, right? You have to know about valuation so that you don't get ripped off. But as I was telling my students in the last class, we talked about how do you create multi-generational wealth through real estate, right? Well, if you're going to do that, you've got to understand valuation, period. Even if you're going to get into crypto, even if you're going to be in the stock market, it's about valuation. So the theories cut across all industries, all kind of assets. Even though I teach it as appraisal valuation, it's all the same. So I kind of broaden it out because everybody needs to know about this, right? Not just if you're going to be an appraiser. What we do at Morehouse, though, is we try and get our students either to move on to get master's degrees or PhDs, or if they're going to go work for a big company, work for that big company, learn everything you can, and then eventually go out on your own and do it. It's not hard. It's just a matter of learning and constantly learning and constantly updating. And what I do for me is I always try and stay out front because I want to know where the money's going, right? Whether I'm investing in property or whether I'm just investing my money in something, I need to know what's the technology going to be like in 10 years. And that's why I was experimenting with crypto and real estate.
So I think that's been very, very much at the forefront, and it's getting closer and closer every day. And the things that you've been doing, I think the rest of us are starting to catch up. But you have definitely put the kids at the forefront to be able to compete in the future, and that's what we want to be able to implement. And the other thing that's really impressive, like with the Morehouse Real Estate Club, with yourself, Brian King, Richard Slayton. You all are all alumni and very successful in business as well. I know Brian's a very successful developer, and Richard's CCIM and done a lot of things in the commercial space and at the bank now, and has had several positions. So the kids get real life experience from people that
Right.
look like them and people that actually care. And one of the things that is really missing in the appraisal space, there's no black chief appraisers at any of the institutions, any of the lending institutions, let me say. And so when you don't have somebody that looks like you to be able to identify, that becomes somewhat problematic. But I believe that somebody from our students, from our 1890s, from our Morehouse, from our CIAA cohort, we got some chiefs in there, and they coming. And I just really
Yeah,
think
but
it's
see,
just a matter of time.
well, let me tell you this. When and I'm a Star Trek fanatic. All right. I'm not a Star Wars guy. I'm a Star Trek. And a Star Trek, Captain Kirk once said, you can there's always a solution, right? There's always a solution. So when I was trying to get my MAI, and I'm leading to something, but when I was trying to get my MAI, the reason there couldn't be a black MAI is there was nobody willing to train them. But what I found is we found a loophole in which if you were a college professor at a 4-year accredited university or college, you could get your credit hours that way instead of out in the field. So I was able to get my MAI by doing that, and then I showed up at the annual Atlanta meeting when they're getting ready to hand out the new stickers to the new MAI guys. All of a sudden, there's a black guy standing up to get it. And they didn't even know who I was because I took all my class away from Atlanta. I went to Orlando, Memphis, and Birmingham to take all my classes and to take my exam. So they didn't know who
So
I was.
you were kind of like a successor to Mr. Roby, that he couldn't take his
Exactly.
appraisal classes in Atlanta in 1956. He had to go to Michigan, and so you kind of
That's
followed
right.
that blueprint and brought it
But see,
back home. And it's
his problem was that he had to get his experience credit by getting the support of some white people, which he couldn't get. I got my experience credit because I was teaching at a 4-year college that every year I taught, I would get 1 year of experience credit. So after 4 years, I had those done. That's why they couldn't stop me because they couldn't find me. They didn't know I was coming. And
but,
I say that because now when we talk about these banks, when I went to the banks to try and get work, at first they said, well, no, you can't do it because you have to be an MAI. Once I got the MAI, I went back to the banks and they said, well, you still can't get work because you don't have enough experience doing appraisal work. And so I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm getting calls from DOT. I'm getting calls from other people in which people are suing the banks and they need an MAI who's not on the bank's approved list. So guess who's the only MAI who wasn't on the bank's approved list? Me.
Wow.
so
So I'm getting all this work
Yeah,
going
I
against the
love
bank,
that.
and we beat the banks. I mean, come on, man. You know me in front of a group of people. Oh man, I was killing them. And so guess what?
well,
The bank started calling me, asking me if I wanted to be on their list. I said, no. I said, no, that's okay.
much
I'm good.
hasn't
I said,
much
I'm good.
hasn't
I'll just see
changed,
y'all in
Oscar.
court. Huh?
There hasn't been much change as far as the
Oh,
black
that's what I'm saying.
MAIs
But
and people being able to get work. You're able to do work as long as you work for somebody. But if you go
that's right.
to start working for yourself, it's like you don't have the ability when you were just doing the same amount of
But
work. So, it,
but
it kind of like,
here's the key. Banks are obsolete. All right. Bitcoin, the blockchain, and DeFi are going to replace the bank. That's why you see all these branches closing. That's why you see what's happening. They already know that there's I call banks zombie companies. They're dead. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah, well,
because
and the same thing for the valuation process. And there's always going to be an opportunity for you to be able to do work if you develop a skill set. And right now, a lot of
that's right.
folks are worried about the AVMs and the appraisal waivers. If you've developed your skill set, the work doesn't have any choice but to follow you. And there's so many other avenues to get work and to get money outside of the bank. The banking
That's
system
right.
has always been closed to us, and it's always been disproportionate, and it has not been fair. And it's nothing to really cry about. It's about trying to get yourself together and pivot. And there's a whole group of young MAIs who I'm very, very proud of, because I know they had to work very hard to get there to be able to do their thing, but they're still not able to monetize at the same level of the other MAIs, and they're all trying to find their way and figure it out. And it's I'm proud of them, and I'll just leave it at that. And hopefully that they can monetize and do what they need to do. But in doing that, you can't have a fear of empowering the folks coming behind you, because they're not your competition. It's like a network, and you're only as
That's right.
strong as the weakest link. And so
That's
that's
right.
been your philosophy, empowering people. I remember, I believe we first met around 2009 or 2010 when we were both doing some work for Capital City Bank. And that was when I kind of thought I had died and went to heaven, moving to Atlanta from Cincinnati, uh, doing work
You
for a
did.
black bank and doing work for a black bank. But the funny part about it was I would have the same argument with the black bankers at Capital City that I would with the white bankers in Cincinnati. It's just after I finished arguing here, I wasn't accused of being incompetent or a criminal. We agreed to
Right.
disagree and can go have a drink and laugh and talk about it. So
That's right.
I was
That's
able to meet you. I was able to meet the Ammons brothers, and I would probably say Atlanta probably has the largest concentration of black appraisers in the country. I would say Atlanta,
but
Texas,
see,
DC, and
let me say
California.
this too. And I've been preaching this to a couple of our mutual friends. I never worked for the banks because there's a whole nother market that developed that is growing. And that is these non-bank lenders, right? And
Mhm.
in many of these small towns throughout the South, I'm talking about from Texas. I do appraisal work all over the country, but especially Texas to Tennessee, South Carolina, all the way on down to Florida. There are a lot of black developers who can't get access to the FDIC money through their local banks because the banks and the appraisers and everybody else has it sewn up and you can't get in. But what I did is I worked with a lot of hard money, we call them hard money, but let's say non FDIC lenders and their brokers, and go into these neighborhoods like Brunswick, Georgia, or Birmingham, Alabama, or Savannah, Georgia. And we find these developers. I can do the appraisal. The lender will accept it because I'm an MAI appraiser, and then they fund the deal without even using the local bank. I've even
Well, it's
had
kind of almost with this current administration that's going on now, these are some of the things that we need to know in order to be able to survive. And right now, the
right.
country is really things are nobody really knows what the future holds, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And some of the things that we are focusing on is reconsideration of value. That's a way where we're able to offer the borrower, if they feel that they've been undervalued, an objective opinion on how to appeal their property value. But that also gives the appraiser the opportunity to be able to explain their work without accusing racism or bias, and it gives everybody a fair and equal chance. And I think short term, that is a solution to appraisal bias and the appraisal gap. Long term is educating and developing the next generation of appraisers, which we have been actively doing. but also in that process, utilizing the data science, evidence based, data driven analysis, which takes the subjectivity out of the valuation process.
That's right. And people need to understand the importance of choosing an appraiser. I tell people all the time, you've got to find an appraiser that is comfortable with your community. I'll put it that way. Whether they're local to the community or they just feel comfortable and understand the community. That's not easy. Some of the bias is not, it's because the people just don't understand the community. That's like me going into certain communities. I just don't understand it. So therefore, how can I determine what I think a market value is if I can't understand the dynamics between the buyer and the seller? I impose
But a
my
little bit of
own,
that.
and that's what messes it up.
So you do need some competency in the area, but I think the data science eliminates a lot of that competency.
Oh
But to
yeah,
your point, there's a whole nother appearance in that gets to highest and best use, which is the spiritual component of highest and best use, which also plays into social depreciation as well, especially in the tertiary markets and the rural areas that you talked about. But even in some of the urban areas, if you start talking about proximity to churches and synagogues and walkable neighborhoods, there is some value to be had in those types of opportunities in the neighborhood. So what you're talking about is very, very relevant, but it's also an opportunity for us to be able to educate people in the community on how to utilize the services of an appraiser, because most people don't understand the impact valuation has on the global supply chain.
right. And people, well, again, what we do at Morehouse is just try and introduce students to a lot of different things, right? That kind of stuff, and also just what the opportunities are, so they can. I tell people we start with a really good raw material, and it's really easier than you think. If you've got students that are eager to learn, they're kind of bright, then you just have to introduce them and get them focused on something, and then you just let them
Yeah.
go, and they'll go ahead and become very successful for the most part. And so
Can you
I
speak a
tell
little
people
bit
all the time,
to developing real estate utilizing fractional interest in Bitcoin?
yeah, sure. As you know, I started talking about crypto in my class back in 2014, and at that time, Bitcoin was under $100 per Bitcoin. And so I was trying to tell my students that you need to, one weekend, instead of taking that young lady out for dinner and the movies and spend $100, bring her over to the house and Netflix and chill, and then take that 100 Bitcoin. Now, and some students did it. I had a couple of students that were, golly, within a decade, they were millionaires. I mean, they did that. But most of them, at least they did put some money into it and start playing with it. We're still early with Bitcoin and blockchain. And what blockchain does is what it's going to do is it's going to allow you not only to become your own banker, but to also take real estate, fractionalize it, and put it on the blockchain so you can either sell, lease, or rent parts of your ownership. Think about what it takes to sell a piece of property now, or if you wanted to get a partner and sell off 50%, the overhead and the time that it takes. While once this thing moves to the blockchain, it's only going to take a matter of minutes to be able to do that. Cut out all the middlemen, and you'll be able to value that stuff almost instantly because there'll be a market out there for these fractional pieces.
And
So
you'll
it's
be
Who
going
do
to
able
you
to
take
speak
secure it.
to? Who do you speak
so
to fractionalize the real estate, the piece of real estate?
Right now, we're still early. BlackRock is talking about it. There are some companies out there that I follow where if you have a piece of property, they already are doing it. They're just very small companies, but you can take a piece of property and you can actually, they will take the ownership and turn the ownership into, for lack of a better word, a cryptocurrency. right? So you own all the coins, 100% of this piece of property. But you can then put those coins out on the blockchain and sell them if you want, or borrow against them, however you want to do it, and do it instantly. Give you an example. That's why I bought that piece of property in January of 22. I wanted to prove that what I did is I used decentralized finance, for those who are familiar with it, and I used my Bitcoin as collateral and borrowed against my Bitcoin and bought the property for cash. And by using cash, I was able to get a cheaper price because the people wanted to close real quick. It was distressed property. And I told them I can close in 2 weeks subject to an inspection. And I closed real quick by borrowing against my crypto. When I borrow against my crypto, it's permissionless. I can just do it automatically. It took me about 30 minutes to borrow $50,000 and have it in my bank account. All right. The interest
But
on that
also,
is,
again, can you speak to the volatility of Bitcoin and when the prices
yeah,
start to
uh,
fluctuate, how that impacts the interest,
yeah.
your fractional interest and the value of it?
No, it doesn't, because see what I did is I borrowed stable coins, right? So they're stuck to the dollar. I didn't borrow Ethereum or Bitcoin. I borrowed stable coins against my Ethereum. All right. So that $50,000 is still $50,000 to this day. There's an interest charge that I pay, but I pay that whenever I feel like paying. In the meanwhile, I bought this property. I have a tenant in that property that's paying me $1,000 a month, right? That $1,000 a month, I'm only paying insurance and my taxes. I have no mortgage on it. I use my Bitcoin as collateral. So I've got basically I get the $12,000 a year from rent. I subtract out the 2,000 for the insurance and the taxes. I have $10,000 a year of net operating income before operating expenses. All right, and versus the fact that I only paid $43,000 for the property. Now I could take that $10,000 every year and pay off the loan as I go, or guess what? That property is free and clear according to the banking system. So I could go out and get a line of credit on that $43,000 value on that house, which is really worth 50 now. So I could borrow and get a line of credit against that 50,000 to just sit there in case I need it for something. In the meanwhile, you're right. The crypto that is my collateral is fluctuating. Well, there are ways to protect so that you don't get liquidated. And that kind of gets down into a rabbit hole that we probably don't want to talk about. But there are ways that you don't get liquidated. And you can play around with
Well,
the bank so you don't have those issues.
Well, Oscar, I'm also a real estate broker, so I deal with sales. And this phenomenon, I don't know what else to call it. It's not as popular as maybe it could be. And it's simply because, like, before your students learn about the Bitcoin and blockchain from you, and the value of that, people just don't know. They don't know how to use, decentralized, money, to purchase things like that. And I think maybe it'll catch on at some point, but again, it's just so unfamiliar to most.
Shani,
No, you're
to
exactly
sort of
right.
help illustrate one of the things that Oscar, how he explained it to me, and my understanding, and Oscar, you could jump in here, was that when Henry Ford first built the car, is where the blockchain is right now in the Bitcoin. The car
Right.
didn't really take off until you start getting the highways, the roads, and the infrastructure for the cars to be able to travel. And now with the smart contracts, the roads are starting to be able to come in and people are
Hmm.
starting to catch up. It's still in the very, very early stages and phases to be developed, and to be able to sell fractional interest utilizing Bitcoin, you don't necessarily need lawyers or recording because of the smart contracts. secure the interest in and of themselves and keep a permanent record.
Right.
Did
And
I
that's
explain
what's
that
going to
right,
happen.
Oscar?
That's right. So
Okay, he the
and that's what I'm
student.
saying.
As the student.
No.
I'll be
You're
paying
right.
attention, man. I'm
We
trying to pick up game.
we are so early in this game, right? People think they're late. We are so early in this game. From the standpoint of Bitcoin, it's going to one day be $1 million coin. All right. So we're still a long way away. I talked, about 10 years ago when it was under $100, and I'm sure everybody there would say, "Man, I wish I knew." Well, when we were there 10 years ago, and Bitcoin was $100, many people thought Bitcoin was a scam, and they figured, I'm not wasting $100 on this stuff. I don't know what that is. I remember back when I was teaching in the 90s, and I was teaching my students about the internet. I made my students get an email address. They cried and complained. What do I need an email address for? Man, I don't need people contacting me all the time. What if if I need to get something, I just read a book. If I need to listen to some music, I got my CD player. What do I need this for? This is just a waste of time. And if you can go back and watch the old videos on TV, they're on YouTube, where they had, I think it was Bill Gates on NBC talking about this stuff, and they looked at him like he was crazy. They said, What do you? Why do I want? What's his name with Facebook? Why do I want to communicate with people all the time? I remember I had guys in my class saying, I don't want my girlfriend to know where I am all the time. You know, I don't need everybody knowing this, knowing that. What is all this stuff? But
But
because we
meanwhile,
didn't
now look at where we are. Like things have
right
changed so
so
much.
much in 30 years. See? So the same thing now, right? We're talking about crypto. And that's when I figured it
Mm.
out. We're talking about crypto 10 years ago. I'm talking about what's crypto going to be like 30 years from now? Why not get in it now? Why not go ahead and put $100 into it and just let it sit there? If you're wrong, then you wasted $100 on dinner. Like you said, I missed the dinner, right? But if you're right, that $100 turned into $100,000 in 10 years. Where else can you get that kind of return? A thousand,
Nowhere, but
a
you've been on the
thousand percent.
forefront. You've been at the forefront of a lot of major investment opportunities. I like to talk about the one where you missed out on when your classmate asked you to invest in this movie and you thought he was crazy. And
Oh
yeah, you want to know
yeah,
who that
I,
classmate
I,
was, Johnny?
Oh
Spike Lee.
no,
yeah.
Oscar,
Spike asked me to invest, and
is
she
that
got
true?
Oh yeah, I knew Spike
She
Lee.
got to have it.
He's a year behind me at Morehouse. We were in the Tri-State Club together for 3 years. So I knew him and friend. I still know him. We used to. I mean, yeah, we had back then we had the same barber. Well, I knew him for. He used to come speak to my entrepreneurship class later on, but I've known him since he's the year of my sister's class at Spelman, their classmate.
Wow.
So at their 5-year reunion, I was there because also that's the year for my wife when she graduated. And I saw Spike Lee. We were at a party, and he said, "Hey man, I'm going to do this movie, and I'm looking for investors." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah. Whatever you can invest, man, you can. And I looked. I said, "Okay, I'll get back to you." And then I told my wife, I said, "Man, I ain't expecting. Man, black people don't do movies. I think it's a scam. I think he's trying to get my money and run off. I'm not putting no money with that dude about some movie. It could be an X-ray. Who knows what he's talking about, dude?" And the rest is history.
The rest is
Did you,
history,
did you
right?
ever, now, was Samuel L. Jackson one of your classmates at Morehouse too?
No, he was no. He's like 6 years behind me. So, but I didn't
Okay.
know him. I knew Bill Nunn. I knew a couple other guys that ended up in the movie through Spike. They ended up in the industry together.
What
So
about
they,
Edwin Moses? Did you
yeah,
used to
Edwin Moses
practice
was
track
my
with
classmate.
Edwin?
I know
Okay.
him. We're classmates.
Yeah, you was the one that
So
started. You used to run with him.
no, I ain't run with him. Nope. I was
I thought
surprised
you.
everybody else watching the Olympics, and I saw a Morehouse guy there. I said, "Hey, that dude got. Wait a minute, what's he doing
Y'all
running?"
didn't even
I
have
always
a
thought he
track
was
program back then. He
right.
used to
I was
run
like,
down Fair Street.
right. That's what I'm saying.
Street.
I knew him, but I didn't know he was a track star or nothing. I didn't know he was in the Olympics. And we were watching the Olympics, and we were like, "Who is this guy from Morehouse?" And then we're
Y'all
like,
didn't even
"Wait
have
a
a
minute,
track.
he's
He used
gonna
to be
win?"
running through the West End. He used to run through the
Right.
West End. He just had a moving at least 13 steps. And he took the academic approach to running. Something about you Morehouse folks. And he
Yeah.
just
About the
counted
Morehouse
13
Street.
steps.
Yeah. And so I mean, I knew him. Every time I see him now in town, the homecoming or something, we hang out and talk. But I was like, I didn't know he was Olympian. I didn't know he could run like that. I figured maybe the police would chase him or something. That he was in trouble. I didn't know he could run that
Well,
fast.
my brother always accuses me of having a lot of hate for Morehouse. And I just say, I did apply to Morehouse and I did not get accepted, but I believe it was because I didn't pass the paper bag test. He was saying
Yeah,
it was
that could
my
be it back
grade.
then.
Now, I think it was a paper bag test because you had to submit your picture back then. And you and Shani would have just barely got in under the paper bag
I would
test.
have barely
You
got
was
in
well
because
in. You was well in under the paper bag test. So I still got a little salt, because I think I'd have been, pretty extraordinary at any
Yeah,
institution.
you are
However,
anyway. They missed out. We
yeah,
can't
exactly.
tell
That's
them
what I
all.
keep telling you. That's what I tell my
That's
brother
right.
all the time.
That's right. You're exactly
So
right. So, but the key is that as I tell people, we come from a people where it's a win-win environment, right? Our ancestors were born in Africa where they had enough for everybody. So when the hunters went out and got food, they brought it back. Everybody ate. Everybody benefited, right? We're in a system now where it's run by people who come from where they didn't have enough for everybody. So if you're eating, that means I can't eat. So they try and take all the money and leave you with nothing. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. We are from a win-win environment. If I help you, it helps me. For example, I'm on this show, right? If I help some of them other guys, they end up at the tax assessor's office one day. And then if I have a problem, I can walk up to the tax assessor's office now, and I got former students that I can talk to and get stuff done.
well,
That's
you
what it's
you
all
got
about.
several students. You got several students at all the tax assessor's office in Metro Atlanta. So there's
I know,
somebody at every office that you have taught. So your influence is far and wide when it comes to property tax
wow,
appeals.
right?
that's
Because see,
incredible.
remember what I said. We come from a win-win culture where if I help you, you're going to help somebody else, and then they're going to help me. We're all going to help each other, right?
Mm,
So that's why when you run into people who say, "Well, I can't help you because you might take something from me." There's nothing I'm going to take from you. I don't need anything. I if you help me, then I'm going to help you, right? I'm going to take you up to Foxwoods to the tribe up there, and there's plenty of stuff up there, and you
Oh, we
can't
didn't
get
even
there
get
really
it. We
unless
didn't
you
even
talk to
get
me.
into your we didn't even get into your work at the tribal communities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that for segment 2, and I think this would be a good place to end this segment, Shani. I know you were concerned
yeah.
about us going over, so I would like to end this segment right now, and I'd like for you all to like, subscribe, and share, and then we're going to come back with segment number 2 and talk about Professor Sistrunk's work in the indigenous community with the Foxwood and how he's teaching there as well. So thank you so much for coming and sharing. And we're gonna get off of here, and then I'm gonna see you all in the next segment. Thank you. Don't forget to
All
like,
right.
share, subscribe. I always forget to say that.